Most people think of obesity and climate change as completely separate problems. One is treated as a personal health issue, and the other is framed as an environmental or energy problem. But according to a new scientific review highlighted by ABC News, these two crises are deeply connected, and they're being driven by the same global food system. The article reports on a large review published in the journal Frontiers in Science. Rather than focusing on one country or diet, the researchers look at global food systems as a whole. Their conclusion is straightforward but unsettling. The modern food system is simultaneously damaging human health and damaging the planet. In other words, the same structures that make up unhealthy diets all around the world are also the same ones contributing to climate change. Researchers argue that treating obesity and climate change as separate issues has limited how effective solutions can be. The article points out that obesity is no longer a localized or cultural issue, it's a global phenomenon. According to figures from the article, more than 1 billion people worldwide are now classified as obese, and that number is projected to rise in the coming years. What's notable here is the contrast the article highlights between obesity rates continuing to climb, even as medical interventions like weight loss drugs and bariatric surgery become more common. That suggests that the problem simply isn't a lack of treatment options, it's something deeper and more structural. At the same time, the article explains that food production is a major contributor to climate change. Roughly a quarter to a third of global greenhouse gas emissions come from the food system, including from agriculture, land use, livestock, and processing and transportation. This means that what we eat and how that food is produced has a climate impact comparable to major industrial sectors. This emphasizes that food isn't just a health issue or consumer choice, it's an environmental force. So, what links these two problems? According to researchers, a major factor is the rise of modern dietary patterns, particularly diets that are dominated by ultra processed foods. These foods tend to be calorie dense, heavily marketed, cheap to produce, and widely available. They're engineered for shelf life and profitability, but not necessarily for nutrition. This explains that these products have become dominant in many countries due to the fact that their food systems incentivize productivity and distribution over health and environmental factors. This isn't framed as a moral failing, it's an outcome of economic and industrial design. The article also discusses animal sourced foods, particularly beef. Livestock farming produces methane, which is a very potent greenhouse gas and does tremendous damage to the ozone layer. In addition, it requires large amounts of land and contributes to significant deforestation and ecosystem damage. From a climate perspective, diets heavy in animal products tend to have a larger environmental footprint. From a health perspective, these diets are often more energy dense and linked to rising obesity when combined with ultra processed foods. Again, the focus is not on individual blame, but on what kinds of food the system makes easiest to consume. One of the more subtle but important points in the article is about solutions. The researchers acknowledge that weight loss medications and bariatric surgery can help individuals, but these approaches don't change the underlying food environment across the world. If the system continues to prioritize cheap, processed, high calorie foods, then medical interventions are essentially working upstream against the downstream problem. This is a mismatch between treatment and cause. The central argument running through the article is that both obesity and climate change are systemic outcomes. They are shaped by what foods are subsidized, what foods are profitable, how that food is marketed, and what options are affordable and accessible. This framing challenges the idea that these crises can be solved purely through personal responsibility, consumer education, or individual behavior change. Researchers argue that without addressing the structure of the food system by itself, any progress will be limited and or meaningless. We close out by emphasizing the importance of seeing these problems together rather than in isolation. Obesity and climate change may look different on the surface, but they're connected by the same underlying forces. How food is produced, how it's distributed, and how it's promoted has consequences that reach far beyond each individual's dinner table, and this affects both public health and the planet. Understanding that connection is a necessary step towards meaningful change.